The first 3 weeks of the eruption here in Hawaii, crazy things would happen in the middle of the night. A new fissure would open up and it would threaten a new neighborhood. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes. I started the Hawaii Tracker Facebook group to help people understand what's going on and get their questions answered.
Hey, how's it going? We're live. This is Fissure 20.
We had hundreds of people all throughout the neighborhoods sending in videos, articles, and images. We spend a lot of time making sure the accurate information gets out.
This is live. There's still lava moving.
They weren't just sharing a story, they were helping their neighbor. If a family was being evacuated, the group would just jump in and help out. So it was huge. They were watching out for each other.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Thank you for the support from everybody.
As we go through this, we're growing closer together as a community. When tragedies like this strike, you really realize how much you need each other.
Aloha, everyone. Welcome. My name is Dane DuPont. I'm joined once again by Philip Ong. Hey, Philip, how you doing?
Doing all right, Dane? Can you hear me?
Yep, can hear you loud and clear. Welcome back. We got not a whole lot going on the volcanoes. You haven't missed a whole lot. But we do have a little bit in store for everybody today. We're going to go over the latest on Kilauea, and Philip has a few interesting things to share with us. We had a magnitude 4.5 earthquake offshore today, and we have a little bit. We want to get Philip's reaction to some of the content, the AI generated images, and the history of the 1935, 1942 Mauna Loa eruptions and the bombing by the U.S. Army. We want to get his reaction to some of the content we've been doing here while he's been away. I think we want to start with the volcano summary. Is that right?
Sure, yeah. Just first of all, thank you for holding down the fort, and thank you to Blue and to Pineapples for jumping in and helping to keep things going there as well. Really appreciate it. And of course, all our community has been engaged this entire time, and not quite all the way back yet. So you see a little bit of a funny setup here today. We'll do what we can, but make sure you catch you guys up on some cool info here. So yeah, if you're ready, we can flip over to our summary slide.
Yeah, let's do that.
And as mentioned, I'll try to keep an eye on chat here, but I'm getting well as well, but give us a little more grace than usual since we're in our slightly different setup here today.
Right. All right, you should be good to go.
Okay. So the Hawaiian volcano summary this week. Kilauea's eruption is short and sweet, and it looks like it's in a phase of recharge right now. You guys can see in the top plot right there is the tilt for the last month on Kilauea, which since eruption ended on the 19th, that the bottom of the V right there, it's been on a fairly steady inflationary pattern there. Right? A couple little variations down and up, possibly deflation inflation cycles superimposed on there, but really it's been a pretty dramatic rise. It looks like it's an order of 15 microradians or so from that graph over the last not quite a month, maybe 3 weeks or so. So that's on par with what we're seeing before the eruption that began in June 2023 here. So it's kind of back to its old ways, inflating at the summit, rising, tilting outwards. But what you see in the bottom is one of the curiosities. What's a little different this time than the last time is some things are not quite the same. For one, there's not nearly as many earthquakes. So we're not really showing the earthquake plot, but it's not really above moderate background levels there. And one curiosity I thought I'd highlight this week was the lava depth for the last month. What you maybe can tell, it's hard to highlight it without the marker here, but right at the bottom of that V, that corresponds to the end of the eruption there at the top, and that plot on the bottom, after that occurs on the 19th, has two different phases of the line actually rising upwards. So I'm talking about on the bottom, the lava depth plot, there's a lot of smaller little up and down variations. We'll kind of ignore those for now. That's something interesting that maybe we can get into in future weeks. But really, it's the rise that you see about 2 meters there that occurs between the 19th and the 22nd or so. And if you look at between the 25th and 28th, there's a second slower rise that occurs about 1.5 meters that occurs there further to the right. So those two things are interesting because that would imply that at least at that one spot the laser is measuring on the caldera floor, which is that western basin area of the lava lake, that there have been two pulses of the ground lifting up after lava stopped coming out of the ground. So one explanation would be that the lava was still injecting beneath the crust and lifting it up. And if that was the case, we would expect to see similar data of other points on the crater floor. Unfortunately, we only have that one to work with online, but hopefully we'll get some insight from USGS on that, whether other parts of the crater floor have also been rising, or the other explanation might be that the whole thing's actually been tilting back and forth. Because as we know, the eruption was focused in the southwest part of the caldera, and likely when that happens, you have extra gas and extra froth in the area. It's probably uplifted more so than on the far end of the crater. And did it possibly wiggle its way back in that manner, cause the ground to actually locally rise in that one spot? So it's hard to tell without more information there, but one of those curiosities. Another curiosity is the amount of gas that was measured at the onset of the last eruption in June 2023. It was measured quite high at over 75,000 tons in that first day. And along with that, we've seen a revision of the volumes from the USGS on the maps that show that maybe up to 60% of that initial surge of volume might have been all gas. So tune in to our full update for more details on that. But that's the long and short of it. Kilauea is still inflating. It's not showing quite the same pattern as it did prior to June 2023's eruption onset, but there are some signs of pretty steady inflation and uplift in the area that potentially could lead to some resumption in short order. It's hard to tell exactly. The last eruptions have actually come up pretty quickly without a whole lot of warning, and that's still a possibility looking forward as well. And that's the summary for this week.
Right. Thank you, Phil. With that, let's go ahead and see what USGS has put out. They're on a weekly update schedule, I now believe. I think they're posting it on Tuesdays. Right now, the activity summary is Kilauea volcano is not erupting. The summit eruption of Kilauea volcano within Halemaumau crater paused on June 19th, 2023. Lava is no longer flowing on the crater floor. No significant changes have been observed at the summit or in either rift zone over the past week. Seismicity over the past week has been background levels, and tilt deformation has been stable. Sulfur dioxide emissions from the summit remain low, with the most recent SO2 emission rate at 170 tons per day, measured on June 6th. So a little bit of a dated, but at this point, we don't really expect that much variation in the SO2 levels. It's at background levels, essentially, and it's fluctuating between those. And at that level, it's hard to measure, right, and you have a little bit of a window on on the accuracy of it. We're being pretty precise.
Yeah. I mean, the little variations are less important than the overall, magnitude of it, right? It's like an order of magnitude less than when it was putting out a bunch of lava, honestly. Orders of magnitude less than when it was actually starting off the eruption. So,
right.
In either case, it's something that's not going to change until lava comes out of the ground again. So yeah, it's basically background is enough to say at this point for the gas.
And that pretty much standard update otherwise. No active lava for the past 3 weeks. We did have that one little ooze up, and that was about it for the end of the eruption.
Right, and we'll review in more detail maybe some more of the intricacies of that eruption maybe next week when I'm back at my workstation. But I think for now we can just touch base, and we're back in sync with USGS here.
Right.
And just waiting to see what happens next.
All right, well, let's take a look at some data. Here we have the 2-day summit tilt plot from Uikahuna.
Oh, okay, so will you reload that page, Dane?
Yeah.
You don't have a version there.
There we go. We have the 1-year GPS.
All right. So yeah, that's the kind of the first thing to mention, because that's what everyone is for the most part seeing on the surface is not a lot of change. And this is the one plot looking at this is the distance across the caldera north to south, with Kahuna the crater rim. And if you zoom into that far right end there, it's actually showing it leveling off and stabilizing a bit. So it's been on a steady upwards. When Atlanta is going upwards, the caldera is getting wider north to south, and when it's going downwards, it's relieving and kind of tracking back together. So you see that little V shape at the right. That's basically the eruption happening. In the very, very right part of the graph, like right where that tick mark way over there, that's where it's looking a little bit flat. It's hard to tell because this is a whole year of data, but really what's interesting is that horizontally, the crater doesn't seem to be expanding that fast anymore. Right? That's a little bit different than before. However, if you look before that jump that you see that began its eruption in June, the tilt does turn a little bit flat there as well. Not the tilt, I'm sorry, the GPS distance turns a little flat as well. So there might be some kind of limit that the caldera has left to right there, where maybe it reaches that limit and then starts coming upwards afterwards. Might be something we saw the last time, and if that is the case, then we've already hit that horizontal limit as well. And there is other GPS data besides this. We're going to go into more details of the component graphs next week. But for the large part, everything around the summit reflecting the tilt value, which we're going to see here next plot down, which is everything that's moving tilting up. That's the important thing there.
All right, we have the tilt now. Let's see.
So yeah, now it's just last month.
Go ahead.
That's just the last month, and this is what we're looking at in our summary here. And that V point on the left really is the crux of when things change. Obviously, a lot of stuff coming out of the ground. And overall, if I'm reading it right, it goes from somewhere around -8.5 to maybe positive 6.5 gain. Is that right?
Yeah, that's accurate.
So that's about a 15 microradian range there. I don't have a plot from before the 2023 onset, but it was somewhere in that range too. I want to say it was between 10 and 20 microradians.
Yeah.
So it's really a similar kind of pimple bursting upwards is one way to think of it, right? Right there at the summit where it's not going outward anymore, kind of come up and out that way.
So on the 29th, when I was doing the update then, we had the tilt drop off, and I called that basically the beginning of a DI cycle. Or it's not clean though. It looks like a couple DIs, maybe two or three in here, but they're not clean exactly. I was kind of curious about that.
I mean, a DI might have like a characteristic signal if it's like in some kind of steady state, right? Like we have a magma chamber. We started describing DI events during the pool era, right? When we see them occur at the summit, and then we see them mirrored at the pool edifice as well, right? Where the pressure is seen to propagate all the way through. So that was a whole different dynamic and equilibrium than we have now. We did see them again afterwards without any output at pool, like some kind of speculated connection between that deeper magma chamber and a shallower one, perhaps. But we know that we now have even a whole extra magma body at the surface that's getting pretty sizable there. It's almost like the magma chamber as well. So it's getting more complicated, and that typical traditional signal might not be typical anymore because we have a whole different plumbing network set up. So that's what I would say to that. Not only that, we're superimposing that on top of this really long-lived inflation. So that could also be affecting what's going on there as far as allowing it to do it in a steady state change of whether it's that hotter gas-rich magma rising up and kind of filling all the space that prevents the gas over the top to come back down, and eventually it kind of fluxes and inverts itself, and it's almost like a gas pistoning process on a large scale. That kind of thing could be happening. But if you have a net, everything's coming up and up and up and up and up. It's harder to do any back down. Make it less frequent or give it a different shape or pattern of the data.
Right.
What I would put out there, I don't exactly know, but then that's
makes sense. I mean, it's good as any.
For sure.
And then we come down, we got the depth again, and I don't know, I just rephrase this a little bit, but it's interesting in the idea that you might have had a readjustment of the surface of that lava lake, that you had this giant table top essentially, and you have weight on different sides, right? And eventually it like teeters essentially back to a equilibrium state because of just the what do I want to go for? Between the liquid and the gas, it creates a fluid layer that's able to move on without reduce friction, essentially, right? Which is interesting.
Yeah, so that's kind of the big level concept of it, right? In practice, we've seen that upper crust actually crack into lots of little bits as a fountain shut up between them and bursting apart. So it's probably more like the idea of tectonic plates, where you have different kind of plates that can kind of move between themselves. Some can go up and down, and some can spread apart, depending on their geometry and how they crack and how they can be in there. So what would be more interesting would be if we actually had more than a single data point in the actual basin where we could say, okay, well, it is tipping, and the tip axis is actually way over here by the vent. Well, it's actually way over there by somewhere else. And so that would give us a better idea of how it's adjusting. We could start analyzing the ooze-ups if they continue to occur for that kind of dynamic as well. But really, we need more data than just one.
Right. Interesting thing to pursue.
Really differentiate whether it's tipping or whether it's different plates moving separately, and if so, where's the movement occurring, where is it not occurring? Or the last possibility is, if that conduit that was coming up into that lava lake from below was able to sustain itself for at least a little while longer, maybe it actually did feed lava in underneath the tank. Maybe the actual nozzle is what clogged up, right? And then we actually had the lava from below still pushing in, and then it also slowed down, right, after one, possibly two pulses. And it's been a little while, and ever since that, the last date of June 28th, 29th or so, it's been coming down on average fairly steadily, ignoring those variations that we see on a shorter time scale there, coming down fairly steadily. That's the more expected pattern there, right? So if it did inject, it injected a couple times and it's been done for a while. That kind of opens a possibility. Could it actually do that again? There was no tremor. The tremor might be more associated with the actual surface exit, where the gas is coming out and billowing out. And maybe if it's injecting below into the magma body, it won't actually give a tremor signal. That's possible. Or if it's very gas rich. It could as well. It's hard to know. It's kind of an uncharted ground as far as having this situation with all this instrumentation.
Interesting.
Always been that way. With Kilauea, right? The more instruments we add, the more things we see. Then we have to see how does that jive with what we're actually observing, and is our understanding on the right lines, or is something off? We need to rethink it. So that's kind of where we are continuously. So we would expect at some point a transition from this every episodic coming up into this lava lake to having some. You could potentially have more of an open system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows when that happens, if it actually happens.
Right.
But looking back into the centuries past, we know that the volcano had lots of lava in there. Like it had like this little gooey plug that would rise and fall with eruptions, and lava would leak out into basins, and so all kinds of things can happen that we haven't actually seen register on instruments yet.
Right, and we don't have any idea what it looks like underneath that jelly layer to see what it's been doing in terms of creating some kind of open conduit of any kind. Right, that's all a giant unknown.
Not yet, and not what's published, and that's what's been shared publicly. Right. So there's a lot of cool science that can be done, and that's followed since 2018, and all the network of instruments that's been out on Kilauea ever since last year, right? Are capturing all kinds of stuff, but we don't have the details of that right now.
Right. Here at the bottom, we have the SO2 for the past month, and we see the end of the eruption there, and then by the 19th, it's over, and we see that reduction pretty dramatically, and then it's just been alternating around background levels since then.
Yeah, those small variations don't really matter, but what matters is the gas isn't getting out anymore.
Right.
So if there is lava actually coming in below the crust, it's still just refreshing the magma in that subcrustal layer and not actually leaking out to the surface. And that's interesting because we're talking about the gas with more coming up, right? But when we get to the year-long graph, we'll see there's quite a shocking difference between the amount of gas reported in this eruption and the one previous to that. So let's keep going where we are now.
All right, we'll go through some earthquake stuff. We'll go through earthquakes a little later. And where's 1 year? 1 year SO2 summit. All right.
Yeah, well, so the earthquakes, let's go through these earthquakes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's all in order. So the 1 month earthquakes is that's really just showing how there's not much variation there with the tilt or anything else we're seeing. That's what makes this different than what we saw prior to the June 2023 onset. We're not really seeing the same elevated earthquake activity. But once again, maybe that has to do with conditions that we're going to need to start up next time. The June one, I should say. Right. So and then the month earthquakes below there, it's kind of showing you the pattern. It's not really dense anywhere. You still, the most obvious feature there is the blue is a pahala. That's kind of ongoing normal on the left part of the map. And you see that ribbon of the south flank, just south of the rift zone. That's normal as well.
Sorry, yeah. I think I need to come up here.
Yeah. So, and then the important part of the summit part there is we're not really seeing clusters of earthquakes we saw prior to the June 2023 rift zone. It was all covering Holly Mountain. It's a little more dispersed. It does seem like it's wanting to line up a little bit with that upper east rift connector. But it's not concentrated enough to be that convincing. Whereas that whole area is also, if you look at it, maybe you can zoom into a part of that. I'm not sure it's possible there, but that's that little zone that's the wedge between the upper east rift connector and the southwest rift connector that makes a little eyepiece right there, just south of Kilauea caldera. And that one is an area that has lots of different faults that can all move independently, potentially, and magma could be getting in, whether in some kind of basal sill layer down in there or projecting some of the cracks that are more like dikes. There's not a whole lot of seismicity there as well, but there is movement shown in GPS that we'll get into next week that suggests that there's still, once again, smaller blocks of land adjusting to the expanding caldera and magma under the caldera area there. So that seems to be where it's adjusting to some degree. It's doing that outside the caldera, as we saw earlier. The GPS signal in the caldera is now stationary and fairly stable and unchanging. So that's really the interesting thing, is that there could be some other activity happening south of caldera there in that earthquake zone.
Right.
Towards the blue, or the deeper. This is colored by depth. The blue or the deeper pathways going down there. So you scroll down to that first plot below the map. That's the
All right. Oh,
depth versus time, which shows. Let you get back there, Dane. On the
yeah, I think this is it. Depth over time.
yeah, go back to the original. All right, there we go. So, no, so that's
1 month.
different than.
Let me refresh. Maybe it got, since I navigated off, maybe it got weird. All right, depth over time. Here we go.
Yeah, there it is. So yeah, you have that kind of steady blue and a pahala. You can kind of ignore that. The thing that's interesting to me is that the upper part where you see the kind of reds and oranges and yellows is not continuous. You can almost see that like in bursts. You see a cluster, then a little gap, a cluster and a gap, a cluster and a gap, cluster.
Is that just a big one than aftershocks, or is that something more, you think?
Well, it's the pattern we see of that fault movement. I mean, it could be a big one in aftershocks, but it could be lots of small ones moving all together as well, right? During those kinds of time, whether you think of them aftershocks or just as a group of earthquakes, all doing the same job, you know, without one super big one to start. So that's how the south flank moves, and that's the same pattern we're seeing there, and it's hard to pick those two apart from this graph. But the overall whole volcano and that shallow part of earthquakes is doing that kind of start and stop adjustment there, rather than the kind of continuous trembling you'd expect if it was building up magma pressure as much. So that does lend to the space trying to be adjusted with the blocks of land actually moving rather than magma trying to push them out of the way at this point. So there's some kind of contradictory things going on there, right? Like, it looks like it's trying to pimple up there at the surface, but not so much so on a broader scale of things. And that's where we'll have to wait and see exactly how it plays out. But the plot below that, the one that's actually showing depth versus longitude, the only interesting thing to point out there is that deep blue source under Kilauea as well is still active, right? And that's something we've been looking at ever since really pre and post 2018. That not just the big Pahala quake, but that cluster to the east of it, right? That's the cloud underneath Kilauea. It's also flaring up now, showing that there's probably some input still moving through there into the volcano. So the supply is healthy, is what that's hinting at there.
You also have those,
and you'd expect more of the same going forward.
You also got those really deep purples in there compared to Pahala, right? Pahala's more around 30, and then beneath Halimama has these purples between 40 and 50 more commonly, seems.
Yeah. I mean, it can vary over time, but yeah, we'll leave it to say that there's different repeater sources and geometries and all that, and you know, they all can feed into the way from different directions slightly.
All right.
So that's the earthquakes there, yeah. But yeah, zooming out to the last year, you can see that really since the eruption in June, it's been pretty similar levels even now. So unlike what we saw when the eruption back in January to March ended, you see that kind of April bump,
right?
Where it jumped up there. We're not even seeing that yet.
Still a ways away.
Prior to 2023.
Right.
So, but you know, it was a little weird, really. When we looked at earthquakes from this pre-June 2023, because even compared to the pre-January ones last year, they were pretty high, right?
Right.
Look at the quarter of January, that was maybe topping out at 600 earthquakes per week. We got close to 1,000, 900,
right?
1,000
800 at least in there. A few, yeah. 4 at 800. 4 weeks at 800.
So clearly something was different between January and June this year, and that's kind of what we'll look at here in a bit. But before we do that, just to reassure everyone about the East Rift here, East Rift is still not showing any patterns. The GPS pool is still showing that long-term pattern of contraction, not any change there. Some minor variations occur even during eruption time, but you see that the overall trend is stay the same. And maybe more relevant and comfort is that the tilt there at the pool is also just showing a fairly steady decrease over the last month.
Right.
Nothing funny going on like we're seeing here at the summit. So then that kind of brings us to the SO2 plot for the last year, which is down there at the bottom. And we'll kind of switch our discussion a little bit here, but the plot when they first reported this, the first day of eruption, they were saying 65,000 tons per day in their updates. And looking at the plot now, it looks more like 75,000 tons per day in that very upper dot there you see in the top right of the graph. That was a peak before this thing came down. So looking at January, which is the other eruption start we have on that graph, that maximum value is somewhere around, I want to say that we reported 12,500 in there.
Which is just a huge difference. It's just crazy. Like,
It's a huge difference, yeah.
I mean, I thought this one was
sure,
big on day one, but I didn't think it was that big on day one, comparatively.
Yeah, so it was like it was extra gassy. That's maybe one way to put it. But a couple of things to kind of step it back a little bit. One is that this eruption began at 4:44 in the morning or something like that. It was
Right.
Before 5 a.m. And they were able to get the gas measurement between 8 and 9 a.m. They say. So that was within 4 to 5 hours. The eruption beginning, they were able to actually conduct the measurement.
The other one.
Whereas the January one began at 4:44 p.m. or whatever, some similar time. So
Right.
there wasn't a whole lot of
Time to get a
daylight
right.
day, or and I'm not sure exactly if they, maybe they did get one that night. It's not quite clear there, but there could have been a difference of up to 12 hours, I would say. If you say, okay, well, we know for sure they could do it between 8 and 9 a.m. If they did it between 8 and 9 a.m. on January the 7th, which is the day after eruption began last time, 12 hours, then that kind of adds 12 hours to it.
Right.
And as we've said before, that very first burst of lava is one of the most voluminous of gas, and the drop then is exponential after that, right? So maybe that accounts for a good amount of it. It's hard to imagine that accounting for that big a difference, though. So I have to do some more math and hear more details from USGS. But if I could ask the gas scientist, I would ask something along those lines. What was the real projected difference in gas at the onset between the two eruptions?
Right.
Kind of projecting backwards from whenever they actually could measure it.
Well,
their known decay.
Well, speaking of gas, USGS put something interesting about the gas in this map that they released on June 7th. And in it, they say, what do I want to take up? Multiple eruptive vents on the floor of magma are fusing directly into the lava lake that sits atop of them, with the vents taking the form of dome fountains. Lava from these dome fountains, which are marked in the orange, is flowing laterally across the caldera floor, the extent to the new erupted area. Oh, this is not what we wanted to show, is it?
No, this is what we want to show.
Okay.
So this is the first map.
Oh, yeah, this is the first map.
And
Right.
zoom into that little box there. You'll see that their initial measurement
14.6.
volume of lava,
Yep.
it's 14.6 million cubic meters. Right? What does that say for 3.6 billion gallons
Yeah.
or so? Right, so
And
that's great. That's a
371
number.
acres. Yeah.
We've been talking about how much gas is at the start of the eruption here, and so knowing that number, now we go to the next map, which was
Right.
released not quite a week afterwards.
This is the one we wanted to read a little bit off of. All right.
And then the second one, so first note the measurement on there that we just saw. It said 14.6 in the last one.
Right, now it's at
Now it says
9.1.
Now it says 9.1.
So we've lost 5
that's-
million.
5.5 million cubic meters difference there, right? If
Right.
you look at that, at 60% of that volume is
Just gone.
adjusted there. So,
Right.
so now let's read what they say, because we actually get a little note from them
All right.
about exactly this.
Yep. Citizen scientists may notice that this map's values for lava rise and volume since the eruption onset are slightly less than those provided from the first map on Wednesday, June 7th. How can this be? In this case, HVO scientists believe that the lava lake was somewhat inflated during its early hours thanks to a massive amount of volcanic gas trapped beneath the eruptive material. But over the coming hours and days, the gas escaped and the lava lake deflated somewhat. The drop surface left a bathtub ring of crust around the edges, marking the initial lava level, initial high lava level in many photos shared by USGS scientists. The full extent of this new lava from this eruption, 368 acres, is also slightly less than reported last week, but this is simply due to revised and more detailed mapping. So yeah,
there it is, right?
That's a big old bubble of gas.
Yeah. So what did they say exactly was the massive? I can't quite read it on there, but the massive volume of gas. We're talking about
Yeah.
5.5 million cubic meters worth of it potentially, right? So I mean, we're looking at it, that initial outburst is lava and gas all mixed together, and then the gas is bubbling off, and what's left is the lava that's kind of sagged back down, right? That's how come we actually were able to see that wave of lava go onto the downdrop block all frothy and leave that ring and then withdraw back down.
Right.
So it looked like it actually split over in downdrop block, which it did because it was frothy, but then it couldn't keep it up because it wasn't so frothy after that initial champagne pop.
Right, the souffle broke essentially. All right.
Yeah, so
that's pretty cool though. Like to have that documented, and we do have it documented a little bit more than just the figures as well. Yeah, we'd like to go ahead and show that video.
Yeah, so I mean, so that's a couple of things that are kind of shown together there, right? The actual report of the gas, with caveat on the measurement time.
Mm-hmm.
And we have this change in a map volume that they're putting out, and then we also have this video that they put out, B1 camera. So something I showed you guys probably before, but I thought it was worth showing again in the context of this discussion, right? The actual beginning of a new vent. So the eruption is already ongoing. This video is rolling here, and several fountains occurring. Let's see if actually it's going here, but
yep, we're going
in that middle left part there where the gas is coming out, just below that fountain, a new fountain bursts out, and it does it right after this big puff of gas. Right? So it's going to be degassing a little bit more gently, and then it puffs up, and boom, here comes lava breaking through the surface and shooting up that new vent. So that's kind of showing that there's some really gassy stuff up there, right? It's not just your regular gassy lava, but it seems to have collected in some larger slugs of some kind, where it's actually able to force its way up and through the crust in places that are otherwise were strong enough before.
Mm-hmm.
Not just this event, but even the southwest event that ended up being the focus of the eruption. Once we saw the lava force its way up that crack in the caldera wall in the southwest there, right? That's actually caused a new crack, or to widen or wedge open a new crack. That's from that distance, rather than going into the subcrustal part of the lava there. Probably took a big bubble of gas forcing its way in there and wedging and creating a pressure to actually occur, right? So when we see the actual first images, I don't think we have those right here, but the first images of that southwest vent opening up, it's not like it's shooting out lava all the way up first.
No.
It actually starts gasping at first.
Right.
It puffs out a bunch of gas. Then the lava comes out, right? And I think you have some experience you could share with us about Leilani and 2018 eruption that's along those lines as well. Right.
The one thing you could see about that wall when we were first seeing it appear during this eruption was that the gas was getting chased, right? The lava was chasing the gas up the wall. So every little bit it moved up, the gas was just ahead of it. And it just was interesting to watch it because it happened pretty quickly, right? Within the span of an hour, I say half of it, the distance up the wall was already accomplished. Like it moved pretty quick up that wall and got established. So yeah, that was cool. Really gassy though. I didn't understand exactly what was going on with this image when I showed it in the original, the highlight reel essentially. But yeah, it makes more sense with all the gas making the variations on this thing in the beginning. Because it was weird up there watching it. Like it was everywhere inside the crater. All right, so now we have just the thermal images just from over the course of the eruption. So June 7th to June 16th, and it ends on the 19th. But yeah, we see the extent of that opening stage of the eruption where we have multiple eruptive vents. We have the entire lava lake covered in a new surface, fresh lava. And then by the 8th, we've already started to consolidate, and many areas are already done. We still have some activity over on would it be just on the southwest, or south, we'll just say, south side. And yeah, we get down to the 12th, and we have consolidated considerably. We just have all activity confined mostly on the west side. And yeah, by the 16th. And then the 19th was interesting because it was stuttering and it was puttering, and then it was just over. Right? I was fully expecting, to go into a phase of wind down like the previous eruptions, not just the quick cutoff, which was kind of unexpected.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think it's interesting to look at that mapped out area where it was active, and what's a wrench in the whole story is that that new vent was actually up on the crater wall, right? So unlike some of the other vents that were beneath the crust and were for sure pushing the crust up from below as they were coming up, this one might have actually been pulling lava on that southwest part of the crust and maybe tipping it down a little bit. For all we know, it's hard, because it was coming off that down-drop block that's that southwest one,
Mm-hmm.
and then falling onto that crusted over area. So you can get kind of weird in there, and that's why I was really curious to know like what is moving up and what's moving down exactly where, and not just the
Right.
one spot where that western basin is on there, which you can see on that image. There's that little most central little pad of lava in there, right? That's where they're measuring depth. So, but really, this is really just to emphasize the asymmetry of the whole system there, and when we saw the ooze so we don't have that we'll go into more of that next week, but the ooze that occurred not in this area is all you need to know. It just shows that the whole thing is molten all the way underneath, and the whole thing is mobile all the way underneath, not just in the area where the lava is coming out there.
Yep.
That's the curiosity still there. That
Right.
the lava depth increases. Does it have something to do with the gas content? Right. So the lava is really frothy, and maybe that kind of frothy lava is what caused the volcano to be so agitated and have it extra earthquakey. Right. Maybe that's what actually caused it to pimple up originally, where it wasn't pushing it out so much as up, because gas doesn't want to push us once up, right? So maybe if it was that gas driven that was making it more of a upwards thing, and if that's the case, could that happen again, right? Could we be seeing signs of it kind of trying to pimple up again? We're not seeing the earthquakes yet.
Right.
Maybe something's changed. That's where we're looking at a whole new dynamic, and not being quite clear what's changed since the last eruption, since it was different than the one before that.
Right.
Are clearly changing. We're just not sure how far they've gone.
We will see going forward. We did have a little interesting curiosity today. We had a magnitude 4.5 earthquake. I believe it's been revised down to 4.5. At 23 kilometers deep, this thing was well offshore of both Hawaii and Maui, about 90 kilometers offshore. Pretty deep, and I put up a post on Hawaii Tracker about this one. It is not an uncommon type quake for us to have. USGS also put out an information statement. We will go ahead and read that real quick. On Thursday, July 13th at 11:29 Hawaii Standard Time, magnitude 4.6 earthquake occurred 55 miles, 88 kilometers northeast of Pa'a. Pa'a. It's Lavaoihoi area, right? On the island of Hawaii at a depth of 15 miles, 24 kilometers below the sea. Earthquake had no apparent impact on Mauna Loa or Mauna Kea. This is the deep earthquakes north of the island of Hawaii are typically the result of bending of the oceanic crust, underlying brittle mantle due to the weight of the islands. This earthquake fits the pattern of past earthquakes related to bending of the oceanic lithosphere. And it's not just north of the... Thank you. Not just northeast, or not just north of Hawaii Island, right? These things can happen all around Hawaii Island. We did have a volcano watch that was put out about this in 2019, and they had one in, I think, like 1995 as well. And this, we just wanted to show, or I wanted to show this image real quick, just to show the downward force and the bending and how it's kind of distributed around the island, so we can have all of these different earthquakes offshore and them not directly related to volcanic activity other than the activity building up and making a giant pile of weight. So anything you want to add to that, Phil?
I think that covers it pretty good there. I mean, it's this kind of background earthquake, and you asked earlier if I even wanted to put it in the update, and my reaction is, well, it's not even on the island. It's like way out there. It's
right.
Kind of related, because our island's so big and heavy, but otherwise it's
not
really here even worth talking about, right? So
right.
Nothing to worry about. What's interesting, as far as that cluster of earthquakes on that map is, since those earthquakes are often so deep and they're offshore, they're often felt on other islands and felt by people in North Hawaii. So, like, that's what makes them something we talk about as people actually feel them more so than some of the other ones. So that's really what's
true
coming from.
Right. It's a more clear signal up there for sure. We know exactly what it is. There's no question on, well, was this Pahala, or was it Mauna Loa, or was it Kilauea? There's no complicated area like that up there. All right. Yeah. So now we have some volcano watches to go over. The most recent one was put out today, and this one goes over the 200 years of Kilauea observation. most on the anniversary, essentially, of William Ellis's visits. Do you want to take this over? Because you like this one, yeah? This volcano watch.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's been a long, a long career of researching the accounts of Kilauea volcano in the early days. And I thought for once USGS was able to put everything in one spot and kind of tie the string, follow the pebbles there from that first visit by the non-Hawaiian William Ellis, right? Obviously, the whole Hawaiian knowledge goes back much further and deeper than we'll touch on here. But as far as people actually drawing pictures that got published in Western magazines and opened Westerners' eyes to Kilauea and Hawaii volcanism in general, starts with William Ellis. And it really is, I think, fitting to honor that 200-year anniversary of that. Just that part of his activity, right? He did a lot of other stuff, obviously. He was a missionary, but really, the fact that he took time to learn the language, to converse, and document what he was understanding, which maybe wasn't always exactly right, but it was the first time it had been done. So that's something to celebrate. And it's a little bit like what we're trying to do even right now, right? We don't know everything. We're not. We weren't raised here within the culture. We try to learn as much and observe as much as we can, but yeah. So it's kind of I'm not trying to convert anyone to anything apart from look at the data, right?
Right.
Across the board and everything. But otherwise, it's the lineage. It goes from Ellis to all those other guys that they highlight, whether it's Titus Cone, another missionary, or James Dana, geologists, or Hitchcock. I mean, these are all references that we've read over and over and over again, pulling out little bits of information to share with you guys over the last many years here. So there's one quote in here was interesting, right? That kind of comes towards, let's see what it is, towards the end. British geologist Herbert Thorold Reed once said that the best geologist is the one who has, quote, seen the most rocks, end quote. So that's kind of it, right? It comes down to experience. And, when it comes to Kilauea, it's changing all the time. So you kind of seeing the most different versions of Kilauea, be a different way to put it. And so if you want to see the most different versions of Kilauea, there's no other way than to go back and read Ellis and to read Hitchcock and to read Mark Twain and Dana and everyone else that's in this, including, of course, Thomas Jagger, who started the whole really massive volume of publications through HBO, and that's what's continuing today. So we've in the past talked about how what we do is kind of similar. We're really just trying to document observations and that people follow the stories, really, that the landscape is giving us here. And yeah, that's a good way to celebrate Ellis.
Just wanted to show the Ellis photo real quick. Just the first image we have, first drawing, right, recorded of Holly Mau Mau.
Yeah, it was from an engraving, right? It was an engraving he made.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and he described it in such vivid detail with his words as well, and so there's a whole publication mentioned in there by the USGS of that the volcano art and how it's documenting different versions of the volcano, and this is the very first piece of art that was published in Western journals there to people actually see. So
right,
yep.
Just showing them real quick.
Mahalo for that part of your work, Mr. Ellis.
Right, and anybody wants to
obviously want more history in the future.
If anybody wants to see more about Ellis, check out the professional paper 1867, shown on screen here. Views of a century of activity on Kilauea caldera visual essay. That was the one that was referenced in the Volcano Watch.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. And we've done a little bit on that before, and we'll do more in the future. But we're gonna just leave it as an honorarium for Ellis today, and we go into more of the history and stuff some other time.
All right. Then we also have Phil wanted to just go back and revisit this previous Volcano Watch from June 9th, so during the eruption that was taking place last month.
Yeah, because this is kind of, the one of the very latest kind of outputs that William Ellis has led us to have, right? So it has led to the whole series of USGS output, and volcano watches are one of them, and the topics have ranged whether it's just Kilauea or not. But so this one I thought was one that kind of ties everything together. Looking at the series of eruption patterns, and in particular, like how the last couple have been really ramped up pretty quickly, right? Fairly short ramp up. We know volcanoes in elevated conditions. It's been inflating and earthquaking and extending and all that stuff that we talk about all the time. But what they're noting is, if I can maybe imply, it kind of implies a little bit that the pattern might be changing a little bit here, right? We've gone from these long-lasting eruptions to we've had one that just lasted 12 days. The one before that lasted 2 months. The run-up to both was not exactly proportional there, but a few months for each one of them, unlike this years-long process we're actually having. So could it be that we're actually seeing the dynamic of the volcano change here? It used to be that we've seen historic eruptions in the past would only last a day. Look at 82 happened twice in 82. You have kind of one day eruptions. In 74, one-day eruptions. In 71, one-day eruptions. So might we be moving to this becomes like a relief valve where it pops open for one day here or there, and we're seeing them more frequently, or perhaps not, right? That's kind of the wait and see that makes Kilauea so interesting, even now when it's not putting lava out of the ground. So I thought that this volcano watch was just a good reminder that even at the start of this most recent eruption, they're saying, hey, interesting how it's not exactly ramping up like it used to do, right? And maybe that's because it didn't recharge for as long. And they said that before this eruption ended, and along those same patterns, it actually didn't last as long either. So it didn't recharge quite as long as before either. Well, so
right, a lot of variables in there. We also have the mini intrusions that it kept doing, the relieving of pressure that it kept doing with this one in the build-up process. So some interesting dynamics there. I'm sure there'll be more hopefully published sooner than later, but we'll be patient from USGS on that whole front on exactly what was taking place there. All right. If you don't mind, I'll skip ahead or go ahead to the flight operations from the Hawaii Volcanoes National Park posted today. So July 11th in the morning, they're going to do a survey in Kahuku, 4,000 feet to 6,000 feet elevation. We got something on July 29th at 10 to 12 p.m. for the hawkbill turtle monitoring supply replacement at Halape. And then on July 28th in the morning, 10 to 11:30, camp removal and rubbish cleanup from Halape. But the interesting one was really I believe the July 14th to 31st. The near daily flights are planned by USGS to deploy and retrieve the temporary magnetometers. Phil, you want to try magnetolometers? Tellurics?
Magnetotellurics.
Yeah, there we go.
Read that.
Across from the entire Kilauea volcano. So they had these things all spread out, thousands of little points. So they're going to be going out and picking up all these things because that survey is concluded, and now we're awaiting the processing of data and that whole thing that leads to the release of the publication eventually. So, yep, that's just the flight operations, and that really concludes our main update for today. I just wanted to conclude a little bit by getting some of Phil's reactions to some of the stuff that we'd been doing while he was away. So, first,
you think we should take through these quick questions on a current activity, or?
Yeah, if we want to do them here, we can do them here.
I see that Nicholas has put out a whole bunch of stuff here on YouTube. Appreciate you, Nicholas. First thing I'd mention is I can't really look them all up, but we have done past streams on Mana'u and Kilauea Iki that are on there. Not only ones that are made, even I believe USGS presentations on them, or Hilo and Manoa presentations on them. Question about A'a and Pahoehoe. Right? This is A'a and Pahoehoe. We've talked about this maybe not so recently, but it's largely just the texture of it is the way I think of it. It has to do with how fast lava's coming out and how it's breaking apart in that manner. Otherwise, the chemical composition of pahoehoe and a'a can be identical. So it doesn't necessarily have to have any more silica in it. You can have more silica in one flow than another, but that's not really the defining factor between us.
Richard,
Do you have any more you want to throw in
yeah,
there?
Richard asks, what signals would indicate a crater collapse or a caldera collapse or a rift zone intrusion?
Well, so you'd expect to see, different from what we're seeing now, some inflation on the rift zone, whether it's exhibited through the tilt meters, which is not a lot of them left in the rift zone there, but by either the rift zone tilt meters or by the GPS across the rift zone. You can also have INSAR popping up, which if there's a signal on INSAR, sure we'll see it, but there's nothing to see there right now. The collapse itself is something pretty rare, where you have to have the lava have somewhere to go
Right.
to create the space for it to actually collapse.
Yeah.
That's really, really rare, really, really rare. So I know that's people are traumatized from 2018, and there can be certainly smaller versions of that are a lot easier to accomplish than what we saw in 2018.
Exactly.
And 2018 wasn't the biggest that it's done in the past. The whole main caldera itself was a collapse feature, so at some point you had to have a larger area of collapse in 2018. So even that wasn't the max of what it can do. But it's still really rare, where you got to have something coming out. The lining was what, 700 feet above sea level?
Yeah.
Something like that, or at sea level or below sea level to evacuate enough magma out of there to actually allow collapse. If you're talking about, okay, the lava came up, it was kind of gassy and it made a little bubble and that thing collapsed. Sure, that can happen anytime, but that's not what you're talking about as far as the caldera collapse that has consequences or outside of the caldera. So that's kind of what I can say that's more reassuring about that. If you were to see the big breakout of the Southwest Rift, for example, right, down by the ocean, and lava starts draining out of Halemaumau, then we're going to start talking about collapse, because we can see there's a very low vent exiting out somewhere at the top. That's what we saw, worst case scenario, in 2018. So the vent opened up so far down at Leilani. Once we saw the level of Halemaumau start dropping down, that's when we thought, oh crap. Right? That's why we knew when I first came on the videos in 2019, even what we're seeing coming out as devastating in Leilani now, this is not the actual thing to worry about. The big post of lava is still coming. That's when we knew.
All right.
So it's pretty unique set of circumstances, and that's why we even do this. And so for sure, if we see any of that, we'll say it. But I don't expect to see it again in my life, to be honest. It's pretty rare.
All right. So going on to the videos that we've done over the past 3 weeks. So we had first the tribute to the content creators on Hawaii Tracker. And really that was a showcase of photos that many of the different contributors have put on Tracker. Just wanted to see what you thought about that.
Yeah, that was awesome. As everyone knows, I've been traveling, so that allowed me to actually kind of stay tuned with what was going on and catch all the best events. And so, what an awesome community to be part of there. And I'm glad to add a little bit of science that we do here, but it's a lot of other people also contributing and driving the whole thing forward. So I appreciate you guys for submitting all your videos, photographs, Hawaii Tracker, and I got to see them too. I got to see from the other side of the world what it's like to live through one of these eruptions here. Pretty cool.
Right. And then we threw it back to the 1935-1942 eruption. And the real one that was interesting on that one was trying to figure out where the 1935 flow exactly was starting, the origin of it. Because if anybody was watching that, they remember that there was... Let me show the rift zone. This thing, the map that I'm showing here shows that the eruption starts outside the rift zone, and there was no real good obvious things in the map where it was that a newer flow had overtopped an older flow, so it wasn't denoted that way. It was more just, hey, why is this thing not in the rift zone? So, Phil, why is that thing not in the rift zone? What's that?
I can't tell you why. I can tell you the why. I can tell you that it has a unique flow there, right? And so one of the things that you were talking about was that comparing that flow to the one that happened at the end of last year in 2022.
Right.
And in the 2022, the lava that was in the area was all because it had come down that steeper slope and had a chance to lose its gas and kind of fall over itself to produce that long channel. And I don't have the primary count in front of me here, but I remember seeing a 35 eruption. There might have been cracks up in that area of the rift zone, but the lava didn't come out. It must have found some pathway, whether it's an old tube or deep crack, to come out off axis to the north of the rift
Right.
zone. And so whatever happened there, that's the difference in the kind of lava you saw. Right? So the thing about that 35 lava is it came out as pahoehoe, as you mentioned, and the pahoehoe flow emitted from that crack as pahoehoe because it was insulated and was able to go through the mountain without losing gas. The gas content is a big part of it.
Right. Very different from 2020, or the 2022
yeah,
eruption.
It's the saddle. It's able to pond up as pahoehoe and actually
Continue. Yeah.
Make a perch pond and like overflow it and then start going towards Hilo. This flow we had in 2022 was not able to do that because it was coming all the way from the top. Right, so that's that might explain some of the different things you might have seen in the photographs there. And obviously there's a whole transition of pahoehoe to that can occur. I mentioned a little bit in the discussion there, right? But the thing is, if you have less gas, you're more likely to have so the gas is gone and it's not incorporated in the flow, and it makes it less fluid and more rubbly, for example, right? If you had a higher, just not necessarily like silica, but like just crystal content in general, the more crystals grow in your lava, the farther they are from their source as the crystals grow, the more internal friction they actually have, and that can cause it to start falling over itself and become an as well, rather than a pahoehoe. Whether it falls over a slope and actually gets its interior exposed so the gases can come out at a faster rate rather than being encased in a lava tube, for example, that can make a difference too. So those are the things that really make 35 different from 2022 and why 35 was a much more worrisome eruption for people in Hilo and why they might have actually gone to the trouble of trying to consider bombing it in the first place. That's what made a difference from 2022 was that unique situation of it popping out off axis as a pahoehoe flow.
Right.
I'll kind of leave it at that. Everything else that's interesting as far as the war effort and all of that, but I'll leave that to yours.
The 42 one gets a lot more convoluted, really, and it's just the annoying thing to me, and I don't think I really expressed it enough during that whole thing, was that just how bad the war records are in particularly on this island. It's like everything was classified and then lost, and then, or not everything, but a giant chunk of it was, and it's just missing stuff. So we try with what we can. The 35 one is better documented in terms of the reactions and who was saying what and doing what and things along those lines. But yeah, very interesting. All right, go back to
obviously that would never fly today. That's worth saying from my point of view, right?
Yeah.
If anyone's wondering, no one's thinking about doing that now, right?
Right.
They're very sensitive to the local outlooks and culture and all that. So, in 2022, that was something we actually had a chance to talk to PTA, right? To ask them directly, and they said, no way.
Right.
Right? So, interesting.
Right. Giant change of pace, because back then it was so gung-ho, just like, yeah, let's go bomb it again. Like, it wasn't like, there was analysis done. It was just like, you want to go bomb it? Yeah. All right, let's do it. Like, that was the attitude type of thing.
Yeah.
Gung-ho.
Different world, for sure.
And then we go from the past to the future and started spawning a bunch of fake images of eruption just to kind of stress test these things and see what they're capable of, and they did some pretty good ones. This was one of Hualalai, essentially, trying to make Hualalai. It's not perfect. I'm sure people on Kona's side would be like, that doesn't look nothing like it, but, it's not, I bet you could fool some people with something like this. Maybe not this exactly, but there's some good things out there in terms of its capacity, and it's only getting better at an amazing speed. So what was your thoughts on this whole thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting for sure. Yeah, I mean, that image of a Hualalai-like setting, right? There's lots of volcanic islands similar, like maybe La Palma, or that might have similar kind of looks there. So it's always hard to tell exactly. It's going to always come down to locals and local knowledge of oh, that perspective is right, or oh no, that's missing, that shape of that cliff is wrong. I think it's going to unfortunately come down to all of that. And I mean, AIs can get smarter over time. You can in theory feed topo map into it, and that like GIS, like a perspective cross section things, right? So you actually can see, oh, here's that, what Google Earth does. Here is a field of view and how it actually should look based on where you are on Earth, and now superimpose your paint job on top of that, right? I'm sure it'll get better and better and better.
It's just so much. It's just so much
actually
easier.
Knowing, hey, like actually that sign isn't up there anymore. Like it came down like during the last windstorm. It's gonna take some local knowledge to know fact check these things, and that's gonna why we're so big on local knowledge here.
Right.
Even community neighborhood by neighborhood, knowing what the rituals are, what's different there, right? So yeah, I think it's gonna come a ways, still for sure. It's just the tip of the iceberg now, what we're seeing. But one thing that's harder to pin down is when you see some shape of a flow maybe you haven't seen before, or even when it comes to the plumes themselves, right? The discussion of whether it's a rock fall or have a rock fall looking plume if the thing explodes violently enough, right? That's not typically what we see with Hawaiian volcanoes, but the AI can certainly put a pyroclastic cloud on top of a Hawaiian volcano, which we've never seen before. Which we know there have been base surges in Hawaii before, not maybe huge ones, but we know that Mauna Loa has shot explosives out 4 or 5 miles from the summit down a slope. So I mean, it's hard to exclude necessarily just on that, right? The actual activity itself, because every eruption, even here in Kilauea, we see something new happen in some imagery that's a slight variation of what we saw before. But we've never quite seen it that way before exactly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a lot harder to me to say, like, oh, that kind of pahoehoe is not how it's like. Well, maybe it is, or maybe it isn't. I've seen some crazy pahoehoe.
Right. I just think that it is an incredibly difficult and almost insurmountable task to try and challenge, like, oh, we're going to use AI to detect AI imagery. I'm like, or any part of AI. I'm like, the part you just described about all this process you'd have to do in order to try and create some automatic verification. I just go make another one on Midjourney in 5 seconds, and you have to do it again. Like it's so much power in the attacker stance compared to the defender on this type of thing. It's going to be rough.
It comes out, local knowledge and the local gatekeeper, right? Knowing what's true and what isn't, and how things are supposed to look or not. Right? So,
all right. So how was the diamond hit?
What's actually got us, right? Just to kind of throw this tangent in there, what's actually got us most worried in the past few years was the guy who put the red lights inside the fissure, right? Not anything computer generated, but actually physically putting red lights.
But even my local knowledge on that one, Yuhan Akaika had to basically call me multiple times to go 1 street away because I'm like, it's BS. There's no way. I don't even believe it. And it was like, no, you should go check it out. You're right there. It's like, fine, I'll go check it out. Well, type of thing. Like, I'll go.
No, we knew it wasn't true, but we needed to know how it wasn't true.
Right. And then it got there. It's like, it was dumber than you guys imagined. Like, it was worse. Like. Yeah. So here I just had the one photo that me and Lou were talking about, this diamond head image. The angle's not correct, but I don't know. We're like talking about it, like what would a diamond head eruption even look like if it did go? And it's like, who knows? So that creates, since there's no examples, no reference, it makes it so much easier to generate complete garbage and be like, yeah, that's real, essentially. Or even something like this, be like, yeah, it would look like this. This is, exactly what it would look like. Nobody knows. You can't, what's your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's all, in geology, we're always looking for analogs. And so there are analogs of rejuvenated eruptions on older volcanoes that, maybe don't have quite the photographic record that you'd like to have, right? But, there's all kinds of process that's really the whole field of geology, right? So, once again, kind of along your doubts of it would generate that, like, unless you train the AI as a geologist first, it's not likely to get the things right, trying to project an erupted and diamond hit or somewhere else where you don't actually have the record.
Mm-hmm.
So,
it's just mixing and matching at this point and just like sending it.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And so, I mean, it's until it gets like some of the major stuff wrong, like, right, like you can't put a giant building that's larger than a volcano on the volcano. right? You know, I mean, like, that kind of stuff is, then it's still easy, right? It's more when I actually are taking another step up and saying, okay, like, well, I actually saw an eruption on Vanuatu occur, and from this perspective, it looks kind of similar. And if I took the sedge of Oahu and sorted it this way, and that's when it gets more dangerous, right?
Right. Not
And it's
there yet.
not there on its own. Someone could take a lot of time to do that on their own, but that's way more intensive than the 5-second mid journey
Right.
generation there.
Right.
So I think your assessment was good. It's not something that we have to worry about in great detail ourselves as far as a natural disaster. But it could be instructive, right? It's instructive even now to say what's wrong with this picture, how it actually might it look, and why, what's the science behind that. So I think there's value in there. And certainly if you're writing like a novel in some alien planet, then why not? Do whatever. You
Right.
use the imagery for your work.
Yeah, so interesting. I'm sure it's going to get better. It already has, and it's going to do so on a pretty gnarly pace. So in a year, it might be worth coming back and revisiting and trying to do it again, the AI-generated imagery, and see if we can get something better. And the nice thing is when we did this, we recorded all the prompts that we used and what platform that we used them on, so we can go back in a year and try them again and see if it's better, worse, or not changed, essentially.
Yeah, and so and as you guys said, the more time you put into it, the better results you can get.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're actually choosing to take just one image and try to get something that this will probably could do better than even.
Right. And between Lou and I, we figured we had something like 1,500 image generations with AI, and like a lot of people, it's like, yeah, I've done like 20 max type thing. It's like, no, we're really cranking on this type stuff for other projects and working on the different platforms, so got a decent feel for it. And there's a lot to feel because it influences your intuition, and once you have intuition, then you can start laying down actual ideas that make sense or are decently coherent, instead of just taking shots in the dark. And when you're dealing with a black box, shots in the dark aren't usually a good idea. You got to start somewhere on the things to figure out what
to readdress. See a comment by Steve here that even though AI is fascinating, playing with it on the channel, just even this is concerning. Absolutely, right? This is where Dana said in the past, you got to know your enemy.
Right.
So that's the reason why we put it up here in the first place. Is as Dane says, to build antibodies to it, to know what it actually looks like, to know how it looks wrong, and so that we assure you that we know how to fact check this stuff as well, right? That's really the crux of it. We're going to rely on local knowledge, people in the communities that know that we know the image is true and verified, as opposed to anything like this. Right. So that's we're coming at from the same point of view, Steve, and I guess kind of sharing just a tiny little bit of it, right? That we can at this point in time.
Right.
And there are other uses as well. I mean, we're talking about eruptions here, but we got maybe mention and plug there is a Purple Maya, as a Hawaii-based nonprofit that's helping locals
with
computer coding projects, and workforce development. And they're having a workshop coming up in August that's using AI to try to embody some of the code traditions and oral history of the area.
Which is a great start, right? That's huge because it helps. No, I think it's a mutually beneficial because it helps people learn the AI, right? That might not, in maybe terms that they're more familiar with, more comfortable with. And then it also helps with the beginning of consolidating training data, essentially, to help improve AI on its knowledge of Hawaii. So really exciting on that. Purple Maya is putting that on with collaboration with the County of Hawaii. That's going to take place in mid-August. I don't want to say the date because I can't remember exactly right now. And that one will be taking place at the community center in Pahoa. So yeah, that's going to be a couple-day event and going to be really interesting. Looking forward to that one. And that was with Purple Maya, guys.
Yeah, and Steve, I see your follow-up comment here. Yeah, if we be creating a network of photographers you can confirm are legit, making better use of their time. That is exactly what Hawaii Tracker is.
Yeah, that's Hawaii Tracker.
That's the whole point of it. Yeah, so exactly, that's exactly why we're keeping the network alive, and those photographers on Hawaii Tracker during the time that there's not erupting, the photographers are the ones providing images of the sunsets or of the surf or what have you, right? That's why we keep that network alive in that manner, because when it comes time for an eruption, that really irreplaceable information that only those guys can capture, then we know that they're deployed and they're working legitimately, for sure. So there's a whole grand plan that I'm not going to get into here that we're working on behind the scenes, to try to make sure we get this thing corralled in the right way and use it for its benefits.
And those plans take time. They take time to get drawn up, to get everybody on board, to get, revisions. And I don't even want to know what adoption's like, but we're working on it. And there's a lot of encouraging signs from County of Hawaii, essentially, with these plans, which is really encouraging with, because it's a hard challenge, even with everybody on the same team. If people start infighting and you throw blockades up, it's like, all right, well, AI wins. We'll just, watch dumb TikTok videos all day, I guess, type thing, because that's where we're going. So there's a whole thing about the internet and how you present a defense against fake news, essentially. And not just fake news, but like extra fake news, fake news. Like we're getting into the fakest of the fake.
Yeah, we should get into all that at some point in the future, right? Just to, so everyone can see our grand plan. We do have, some that'll come in due time here. We have quite a lot of plans unrolling, and we'll unveil them sooner than later. And you guys want to.
There'll be announcements coming up, basically. They will be coming
for that.
All right. Well, I think that covers everything for this evening. Appreciate everybody that tuned in. We do go live Thursdays at 5 p.m. That is our normal time, Hawaii Standard Time. Unless something happens, something, like a weird eruption that unexpected goes off, between then we'll go live and try and cover that. It has happened, we've done it before. But otherwise, we will be back next Thursday, 5 p.m. and go over it. We'll have a little bit more comprehensive update. Phil will be back full, ready to go. And that will do us for the night. Any last words, Phil?
Thank you, Dane. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Yeah, welcome back. Welcome back. And for Philip Ong, I'm Dane DuPont. Aloha, everyone.